Well, good morning again. Great to see all of you. And just in case you didn't know, ready or not, Christmas is here, right? So I don't know what you've got left to do. You've got shopping to do. You've got decorating to do. Maybe some of you have been prepared for a month, and some of you are like, I'm still not prepared. But we're there, and we are so excited to be able to spend time talking about the Christmas season today. I'm excited for where we're going to be on Wednesday. I hope that you're able to join us, like Pastor Andrew said. Bring a friend, bring a neighbor, bring a coworker, whoever. We would love to have them. It's going to be an exciting time, and we would love to celebrate that with you. Two things I want to talk about just briefly before we dive into our conversation today. I want to remind all of us, next week is an online-only Sunday. So we do this pretty much every year. We're going to have, obviously we have church today. You're sitting here in church, right? But then we also have Wednesday. So we've got an extra service this week. So next Sunday is online only. We've got an online devotional for you already loaded up and ready. So you can connect with that, whether it's Sunday morning or another time next week. But it's a great time for our volunteers to take a break. We hope that you'll spend time connecting with your family, hanging out, doing some fun things. And I always tell people, they're like, but I want to go to church somewhere. I say, go for it. Go to another church, go with a friend, go wherever, go visit somewhere like a secret shopper, steal their good ideas, and then bring them back to us, right? So we can use them too. So it's great. So if you'd like to go visit another church, please feel free to do that. Go hang out with some friends and connect with people. But just a reminder for that, and we will be back here on January 4th. And the sermon series, I want to cue up this a little bit because January 4th, we're launching a new sermon series. I think it's going to be a really fun conversation to have. I think it's going to be really helpful. That conversation is called viral theology. One of the things that's unique, and you already know this, but we kind of have to think about it a little bit. One of the things that's unique about being a follower of Jesus in the generation that we find ourselves is we have to do some things with digital discipleship. And what I mean by that is what we do in our habits that are formed online are also influencing what we believe and how we live in ways that they haven't in the past. And so even when you think about the idea of the internet coming in, but then you fast forward and you go, okay, what's social media doing? And how do we handle specifically when we see things on social media that particularly make claims about Jesus, about God, about church, about faith, about all of those things? How do we process that? How do we do it from a biblical perspective? How do we evaluate that when it comes to how we're approaching those things as followers of Jesus? And so I've said this already. Some of you have done a great job. You've sent me some videos and things to respond to. But if you are coming across over the course of the next week or so, you come across some videos that you're like, that's interesting. I wonder what we should do with that. Please send them to me. I've got some good stuff already, but we're still building out kind of the last 2 weeks of that conversation. And so that's what we're going to do. So I would encourage you to come, especially if you are a parent and thinking about how do I teach my kids how to do this, right? Because our kids are kind of stepping into this. And it's not an area that we're necessarily great at, because it hasn't been something that's been on our radar for a long time. And so I'm excited to have that conversation starting January 4th, and we'll hope that you'll be here with us for that as well. So, but for today, thanks for listening to my 2 commercials real quick. For today, this is the last conversation in our Just As He Promised series. So if this is your first time connecting with us, whether you're sitting here in the room, you're watching online, here's where we've been. We've been looking at the promises that God made, particularly promises connected to Christmas. And so we've looked through those things and thinking about, okay, when God makes promises, how do we respond to them? And ultimately, the greatest promise that God ever made when we look at Scripture was the promise of Jesus. And so when we get to Christmas season, we look at that and we say, okay, so Christmas is the coming of that promise, and then Jesus would do some things to fulfill even more promises that were connected to him and things that he promised, and how do we live in light of that? We've spent a good amount of time over the last couple of weeks kind of looking backwards. Today we're going to spend a little bit of time looking forward and balancing how do we balance that idea of looking back and remembering those things, and then how do we look forward to what Jesus said he was going to do and what we can look forward to in the future. Now, I want to start this conversation today with talking about a movie. I'm interested, we'll put it up there in a second, but I'm interested to see, who's seen this movie? This is a Christmas movie that will not show up. If you see like a list and it's like top 10 Christmas movies, it will not be there, okay? It's not one of the ones that's super well loved or anything like that. It's not bad. It didn't kind of take off the way that maybe they wanted it to or anything. But this is the movie. It's called I'll Be Home for Christmas. Now, here's the question. How many of you have actually watched this movie? Okay, that's what I thought. Like 10 of us in the room have watched this movie. Okay, so here's the thing, right? It was a Disney movie, 90s. That's Jonathan Taylor Thomas. If you don't know who that is, world. Okay, so that's why. So it's Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and Jessica Biel is the girlfriend, okay? So this is like 90s Christmas. If you're a 90s kid, like this was what we watched on Disney Channel, okay? So it's a movie that, obviously Christmas movie, and like I said, it won't be on any of the top 10 lists, but at some point in the Christmas season at my house, this will find its way onto the TV. Here's the perfect time to put this on. If you're looking for something, if you need like 2 hours to wrap presents, and you're like, I just need something on that I don't have to pay attention to, this is the movie for you, okay? It's funny. There's little cheesy moments. Like I said, Disney's 90 Christmas, that's exactly what it is. There's nothing bad, but it's just kind of like, it's not going to make it onto any of the lists. It's kind of funny. So if you're looking for a movie to watch, have at it. But here's why this movie came to my mind, okay? And I'm not going to ruin the whole plot, but this is kind of the idea. Jonathan Taylor Thomas is a college student who's from somewhere back east. I can't remember if it was like Boston or something. He's from the East Coast. He's a college student, and he goes to college in LA. So obviously, when the movie picks up, it's like the end of the semester. He's getting ready to decide what he's going to do on his break. And obviously in LA, it's like really nice and sunny, and his parents want him to come home, and it's snowy and cold and whatever. And he's like, I don't want to do that. And he's actually got a plan to go to like Mexico. He's like, I don't want to go anywhere cold. I'm just going to stay where it's warm. I'm going to go to Mexico. And the dad wants him to come home so much that he says, if you come home, I'll give you the Porsche, okay? Plot twist, he decides to go home, right? So everything changes. He decides he wants to get there. The problem is everything goes wrong with him going home. And so he makes a plan to go home, and he's like, these things go wrong. I won't ruin it for you. But he has to try and get home. And the whole movie is him trying to get home, and there's problem after problem after problem after problem, okay? So he's trying to get home. And I think that at some level, right, when you think about it, there's actually a lot of Christmas movies that have to do with the idea of going home. There's that other movie, Christmas with the Cranks, where like they're getting ready to go on a cruise and the daughter says, I'm coming home, and now what do we do? Right? There's all these movies that have to do with coming home. And I think that this idea of coming home is kind of etched into our idea of the Christmas season. I think at some level this is true, that everyone wants to go home. At some level, we want to go there. Now, for some of us, when I say that, you go, yeah, I actually really do like going home. I like when we go to my parents' house for Christmas, or my sister's house, or my family's house, whatever. I really like going there, and it's fun, and it's great. It's where we all go, and it's awesome. There's some of us that when I say everyone wants to go home, some of you might have went, not me. Right? I actually don't want to go there. It's a little bit too traumatic. There's too many things going on. Like the relationships aren't good, or there's people there I don't want to talk to, or I don't want to deal with this issue. But I do think that this is true, right? There are pieces of Christmas from when you were a kid or just in the past that you do enjoy moving into the future or making a part of your Christmas season. When you get married, this is a conversation you have, right? How much are we going to do from when you were growing up, and how are we going to celebrate that way? What are we going to do about the way I grew up and how I want to celebrate? And then some of what we do is we take those things and we put them together. We like to, at least at some level, we want to feel something about what it was like when we were a kid, or what we enjoyed about Christmas in the past. And that puts us in a place of like thinking about nostalgia. And I think that this is true too. Some of the magic of Christmas is found in the nostalgia. It's found in the ability to think back to what it was like, or to think back to those memories when all of you were there. If you're not all there anymore, you were all there. And what we ate, and the presents we opened, and what kind of tree we had, and all of the things. And I even know that this is going to happen, right? Some of you this week are going to go to an in-law's house, and you might even bake something to bring with you, because you know they're not going to have it, but you need it there, right? Because it's just what you want. And so there's some of the magic, like we want to pull those things in. And there's some of this magic of nostalgia is also in the way that we think about the Christmas story, right? We don't think back to a time when we were there, but we think back and we look at the nativity, and we think back to this place where there was a baby named Jesus. And he's surrounded by Mary and Joseph. And depending on what nativity you have, there's other animals there, like camels and mules and things like that, right? And there's all these things. And we think back and we go, what a beautiful time. We remember how meaningful that was. And so some of Christmas is this thought back, this idea of thinking back to what was either for us or what was significant to our faith. But I want us to think about things in a little bit of a different light today. And I would say this, that the gift of Christmas is about looking to the future more than living in the past. The gift of Christmas, what Jesus gives to us in his coming, is actually about looking to the future more than about looking to the past. Before we dive into our scripture today, I want to remind us of the follow along. So if you haven't connected with us before, if you scan the QR code that's on the screen, it will take you to our website. You can get all the notes and all the verses and everything. Obviously, those will be up on the screen for you, but you can do this if you're at home as well if you'd like to connect this way. If you're going to open a physical Bible, we're going to go to John 14. And that's where we're going to spend a good amount of our time today is in John 14. And we're going to start in verse 1. We're going to take our time and kind of walk through this, okay? So we're literally going to go the first couple of sections here. We're just going to go sentence by sentence. John 14, verse 1. This is Jesus talking. This is what he says. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Some of us, we can grab onto that. We can be like, okay, I needed that today, right? Just take that and kind of take it calmly. But here's the other thing about it. I see this, and if we're just diving into the scripture and we're starting in John 14 and we see this sentence, we have to ask this question. Why? Why is Jesus saying this? Because I want you to remember this, right? For some of us, this is obvious, but I want us to remember this. When the Gospel of John was written, when any of the scriptures were written, the verses and the chapters weren't there, right? So those were added after so that when I say we're going to go to this place in scripture, you can turn there, you can get there, right? And you can remember where we were. Those weren't there. So whenever we see a sentence like that, we see Jesus say, don't let your hearts be troubled. We should go, why is Jesus saying this? Why would it would be very weird for him to just walk into a room and just say that automatically unless we know the context of what's going on. So if we back up a little bit to John 13, in verse 33 of the chapter just before, this is what it says. Dear children, I will be with you only a little longer. And as I told the Jewish leaders, you will search for me, but you can't come where I'm going. Now, he's talking to the disciples, and it's interesting to me because sometimes we see pictures of the disciple, not pictures, but, paintings or renderings of what the disciples look like. Sometimes it looks like Santa Claus could be a disciple. Like, they look so old. They were not old. Late teens, early 20s. That's kind of what we're talking about when we're thinking about the ages of the disciples. So they're not little kids. So when he says, dear children, he's not saying they're 5 or 6, but what he is saying is they're younger than him, and they have been following him for 3 years. And he looks at them and says, I will be with you only a little while longer. And then he says, you will search for me, but you can't come where I'm going. Now, think about the disciples and how they're understanding this. They have spent the last 3 years giving their lives to Jesus. They've spent every waking moment with him. They've spent holidays with him. They've gone to the temple with him. They have gone to feasts with him. They've gone to weddings with him. And every time he leaves them, it's usually to say this. He usually says, you go over there and I'll meet you there, right? So you're just going ahead and I'll be there. Or it's, I'm going to go over here and I'll come back. Every time he goes away, that's what he says for the most part. He tells them to go somewhere and then come back to him. There's always this, I will be there. And then he says to them in this verse in the upper room before he would go to the cross, he says, I'm leaving and you can't come. Now, every parent knows you say that to a child and you are going to have them stuck to your foot, right? Because they don't want you to go. The disciples kind of have that response. They freak out for a minute. They say, why can't we go, Jesus? What's the problem? And he goes, you're not ready. And this is where Peter goes, I would die for you, Jesus. And Jesus kind of laughs for a second and goes, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times in the next 24 hours, right? Because you can't come. You're not ready yet. So that's why Jesus opens in John 14. He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. But that's not the only thing he starts to say. In the rest of verse 1, this is what it says, right? Don't let your hearts be troubled. And then he says, trust in God and trust also in me. He says, don't freak out. Just trust me for a minute. Hear me out. Hear what I have to say. And then this takes us to a place, it takes the disciples to a place, it takes us to a place where we have to ask this question. Can we trust God? By the way, everyone asks this question. Whether they claim to be a follower of Jesus, whether they claim to have another religion, whether they claim to be irreligious, that everyone asks this question, right? Can I trust the idea of God? Can I trust who he is? Can I trust what he does, what he's going to say? And the disciples in this moment, they have to ask, do I trust God? Do I trust what Jesus is saying to me? Or should I just continue to freak out? When he says he's going to go and I can't follow him like I followed him for the last 3 years of my life, do I trust him? And over the course of the conversation that we've had in this sermon series, we've talked about some of these promises that God has kept. On the next slide, I just have 2 verses to kind of show us. Isaiah 7:14 says this. Isaiah writes this. He says, all right then, the Lord himself will give you the sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. You see, hundreds of years before Jesus was ever born, Isaiah makes this promise that's a gift from God and says, this is going to happen. And he very specifically says, this is exactly how you're going to know. And this is Jesus' name, right? That he is Emmanuel. He is God with us. This is part of the promise that Jesus will come and he will be God with us. And just a couple weeks ago, we looked at these words from Zechariah in Luke 1, verses 69 to 70. It says, he has sent us a mighty Savior from the royal line of his servant David, just as he promised through his holy prophets long ago. Now, the significance of these words was that Zechariah had his son, John, had just been born, but he's saying the Messiah is coming. He's here. God has brought him to us. Jesus is still in the womb. And yet Zechariah knows because of what has gone on and for the trust that he puts in God to keep his promises. He goes, this is going to happen. So as we think about this, can we trust God? We look back at scriptures and we say, look at all the promises that were made in the Old Testament and how they've come true in the New Testament. Can we trust God? Now here's the thing. Here's where we get stuck sometimes. Because sometimes, and when people ask this question about can we trust God, what we're really asking is this. Can we trust God to do what I want him to do? Or can we trust God to do what we think is right? And the answer to that question is actually no. Now here's why. It might seem a little weird. Can we trust God to do what we think is right? The answer is no. Because we are not the one whose thoughts actually matter on what is right and what is wrong. His are. And too many times when this disconnect happens, when we think about the trust in God, what we're really thinking about is, will God do what I think he should do? Will God do what I think is correct? Will God do what I think is just? Will God do what I think is fair? Will God do what I think is best? God doesn't ever say that he'll do what we think is best. But here's what God does say, or I would ask the question this way. Can we trust God to do what he says he's going to do? And the answer is yes. Over and over and over again in Scripture, what we see is that when we look at what God says he will do, he will always do. And that comes true from the Old Testament to the New Testament and in Jesus' life and wherever we want to look. So if we go back to John 14, and we go to verse 2, this is what Jesus continues to say. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? So Jesus says, hang on. He goes, I'm going, right? You can't go, not yet. But when I go, there's going to be room for you. It's not that you can't go ever. It's that you can't go yet. And there is room for you. There's going to be a place for you. And I wouldn't have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you if this wasn't the case. And then he goes on in verses 3 and 4. And he says this, when everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. And you know the way to where I'm going. He says, when it's all ready, when everything is prepared, when everything's set up, he goes, I'll come back for you. I'm not going to leave you, right? Just like he said other times to the disciples, I'm going over here and then I'll come back. He says, I'm going to somewhere you can't go and then I'll come back. And then he says that last phrase. He says, and you know the way to where I'm going. Now hold on to that for a second. We'll come back to that verse or that sentence. But here's what I want us to get. As followers of Jesus, the place we will feel most at home is a place we've never been. The place we'll feel most at home is a place we've actually never been. And this feels weird to us because the idea of home is always somewhere you go back to, right? You always go back to that place. It's somewhere you've experienced. You know what you're getting. You know where it is. You know what to expect when you're there. But I think there are some ways in life that we understand this happens. There's a couple ways I want to talk about briefly. Some of us enjoy going to vacation the same place over and over and over again, right? We have the place we love to go. We know what we're going to get. We know that we love it there. And if somebody says to us, do you want to try somewhere new? There's that part of us that goes, either we outwardly say no, or we say, I don't want to risk it. Right? Because if I go to a place that's new and I don't like it, it's not like if you take a week off for vacation and it doesn't go well, you can like return the week off that you had, right? You can't just, it doesn't fit, so you just bring it back to the store. Doesn't work that way, right? So you're like, I don't want to waste a week. I don't want to go somewhere I don't like. But maybe you've got a friend or a family member that says, hey, this place is actually great. You'll really love it. You should go. And you try it, right? And then maybe you're like, this is actually great. I actually really love this, and it's good, and all that kind of stuff. Even those places, you had to go to that place for the first time in order to know that you would love it. And some of us have those places that now we know that we've tried it, we've gone, we actually always want to go back there. Maybe some of us have even bought a beach house or a guest house or an Airbnb or something like that, right? Because we say we want to go back to that place over and over and over again. There was a point where we were never there, and yet it became kind of like a second home to us. This is also true with your family. I think it's crazy sometimes when I think about it this way, but there was a time in my life where I didn't even know Becca existed. We lived 10 minutes apart from each other. Had no idea she was there, right? And then you go a step further. There's a time in my life I didn't know any of those 4 crazies that now live in my house ever existed, right? It wasn't in my brain space at all. And now when I think about, well, where do I want to be on Sunday or on Christmas morning? I want to be with them, these people that at some point in my life I had no idea ever even existed, right? But yet they became home because now I do know them, and we've built our life that way. And now that is the place where I want to be. And so at some level in life, right, we get to these points where home isn't the place we always thought it would be or it would always be. In fact, that place changes. If going home meant going to your parents' house, at some point your parents won't own that house anymore. Or somebody you know won't own that house anymore. Right? It means that going home to see all those people is not going to be that same way anymore because they're not there anymore. But when we think about it this way, we look at what it means as a follower of Jesus to go home. It means we're going to a place we've never been, but we will feel more at home than we've ever felt at home. And there's an aspect of that where Jesus goes, trust me, right? Don't freak out. Don't let your heart be troubled. Trust me, because what's coming is better than what you know. Now, remember, I said that last sentence in verse 4, and you know the way to where I'm going. That sentence didn't sit well with one of the disciples. And so we go to verse 5 of chapter 14 for a second. This is Thomas. He goes, no, we don't, Lord. We have no idea where you're going. So how can we know the way? I think that Thomas and Peter were the disciples with the least amount of filter in what they were saying, okay? Jesus says it. Thomas is like, nope, don't know, Lord. You got to tell me because I don't know how to get there, right? And please don't leave without telling me how to get there. You've been in those spots, right, where you're like, you've got to follow someone somewhere, but you have no idea where you're going. You're like, we are going to lose each other. Like, there's no chance. We're staying together. Thomas is kind of in that brain space. He's freaking out a minute because he doesn't know where to go. Now, he actually does. He just thinks he doesn't. But I know that this is true, that going home can be hard if you don't know the way. Going home can be hard if you don't know the way. Or going home and you don't know how to handle that situation anymore. You don't know how to handle that conversation anymore. You don't know how to handle the people that are there anymore. You don't know how, you know what I mean? Like, there's just aspects of it that get really, really difficult. And I understand that around this time of the year, that can be the case as well, that going home is just difficult because it's not the home that you think you knew. And in this moment, Thomas is saying, Jesus, I thought you were home, right? This is where I thought I was supposed to be for the rest of my life. And now you're changing that up on me, and I don't know what to do with that. But then Jesus goes on to say this, and this is one of the most famous verses you'll ever read. John 14, verses 6 and 7 says this, Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. If you had really known me, you would know who my Father is. And from now on, you do know him and have seen him. Jesus says, you don't need to worry about how you're going to get there, Thomas. I'm the way there. This is where it gets interesting when we think about asking the question, like, how do we get to God? This is where, as followers of Jesus, this is the most clear answer we'll get. There isn't, in other religions, there's a roadmap that's handed to people, like, you have to do this, and you have to turn here, and you have to make sure you're there, and you have to make sure you do this. And Jesus says, no, that's not the way. The way is me. This is how you get to where you're going. This is how you get home. This is how you get to the Father, is through me. I want us to understand a few things about this so that this idea really kind of like sinks into our hearts as we think about this idea. The first thing I want us to know is that Jesus not only expects you, he's setting a place for you. If you're a follower of Jesus, Jesus not only expects you to be there, he's actually setting a place for you. Let me give you these two scenarios. Maybe at some point in your life, you have been invited to spend a holiday with someone else's family. which is really, really nice, right? That they would invite you in and they love you and they're like, hey, come be a part of our celebration. But I also know that there's usually some awkwardness that goes with that, right? Because it's not your place you're used to. Or maybe if you're married, like the first few times you got invited to the in-laws' place, it was a little bit like, what do I do? Where do I sit? How do I know? Like all that stuff. Let's just imagine you got invited to somebody else's house, right? To go and you're going to have dinner at their house, whether it's like New Year's or Christmas or whatever. And you show up and you walk in the door. They're like, oh, we're so glad you're here. But they didn't actually have a place for you at the table. So they grab the chairs and they slide them over and they make a spot. They're like, here, come sit next to me. And they situate it and they grab you a plate and they situate, right? And they made sure that when you walked in, they were like, oh, yeah, we have to make room for you. And you're like, oh, that's so nice. Thank you for giving me a spot, right? But imagine the difference. Imagine the difference if you walk in and not only is there a spot for you, but there's name tags all around the table. And there's a spot with your name on it. There's a plate that's there for you. There's silverware that's there for you. There's a chair they didn't have to grab from the other room and slide over. It's prepared and waiting for you. Very different scenario, right? This is what Jesus is doing. When Jesus says to the disciples, right, I'm going here, you can't come yet, but when the time's right, you're going to come and I'm going to prepare a place for you. When you show up, when we step over into, after we die and we step into that, it's not going to be, oh, let's find a chair for you. There's going to be a place with your name on it, waiting for you. Because Jesus is there preparing it for you right now if you're a follower of Jesus. He not only expects you, he's getting ready for you. And when you show up, there's going to be a place with your name on it. I think this is important to understand too, that you don't need to know the way or be the way because Jesus is. There is nothing that changes the fact that Jesus is there preparing a place for you right now if you're a follower of Jesus. There's nothing that's going to get in the way of that. Jesus isn't going to change his mind. He's not going to give your spot to another place. And sometimes when we look at those verses and what's Jesus preparing, is it a dwelling? Is it a mansion? Is it, people kind of throw that word around. Dwelling is kind of the word. It's a place to belong. When that place is there for you, it's not going to get given away to someone else. You don't need to be the way. You don't need to be the one who knows all the directions and knows all the things because Jesus is that person. And so when we don't get all the information, we don't know all the answers, we don't understand it all, what we need to understand and the person we need to know is Jesus. And this is the reality, right? That when the time is right, Jesus will take you home. I was thinking about this. I heard it was either a podcast or something I was reading. I don't know. It was a few months ago now. But I was listening to a couple guys talk, and they were followers of Jesus, and they said, you know, when we die, he goes, I hope it feels like this. I hope when I die, it feels like when you were a kid, and you were asleep in the car, and your parents just kind of picked you up and carried you into the house. And I thought about that because I remember when I was a kid, you know, we couldn't shop online. And so what my parents would do is they'd always drop me at my grandparents' house on a Friday night, and they'd leave me and my siblings there, and they'd go Christmas shopping. And so we'd hang out there, and by the time they would get back, right, it was always like when we got home, it was like, it's bedtime. Like it's not hang out and watch a movie or anything. It was like, it was 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, like you're going to bed, right? And so I remember this, and I would say to my parents, I'm just resting my eyes, right? I would say that in the back. And inevitably, I always fell asleep, right? And so I remember this. I think this is the idea, right? And when I explained that to you, some of you went, oh yeah, like you remember that feeling. You totally understand that. Even though your parents haven't done that for you for decades, right? You know what that felt like. And I think I can't guarantee it, right? I haven't died yet. I think that's what it feels like. Like Jesus comes back and he goes, I got you. I'll take you home. You don't need to know the way. You are not needing to be the way. I'm the way. And I will take you to the place that is more home than you have ever been in your life. And this is what he did. I want to go back to that idea of nostalgia for a minute and I want to say this very clearly. Nostalgia at Christmas is not a bad thing, but if we get stuck there, I think it's a bad thing. If all we're thinking about is thinking backwards instead of moving forwards, that's a problem. And nostalgia, the way that I understand it, is this. It's the desire to return to a place that no longer exists. You can't go back to that place, right? If we recreate in our brain what the best Christmas morning was when we were a kid, there's little pieces of it that you could recreate. Right? You could make sure you have a real tree and not a fake tree if you love Christmas like I do. You can make sure that there are presents and not presents. You can make sure that there's this for breakfast and not that for breakfast. You can make sure that you can do certain things, but you can't go back to the place exactly as it was. And it's easy and tempting to think in that terms. Or it's easy and tempting in general, sometimes as followers of Jesus, to think back to what Christmas was like or what church was like or what Christianity was like when we were kids and think it was better. But the reality is this: we were never meant to just keep looking backwards. One of my favorite quotes from The Office, and if you're an Office fan, you'll know this quote 100%, from Andy Bernard, right? This is what he says: "I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them." And many of us feel that way, right? And by the way, for some of us, don't miss this, this week is going to be the good old days one day. Don't miss that. Don't be so worried about what used to be or what's going to be that you miss what's happening right now. But here's the thing. For us, for followers of Jesus, the good old days are not what's behind, they're what's coming. It's not about what happened before. Do we want to think back to Jesus the way he was? Yes. Is that a massive gift? Yes. Is that a massive, important part of our faith? 1,000%. But he didn't save us so we would keep looking back. And too much nostalgia, this is actually true, too much nostalgia becomes unhealthy. We keep looking back. Right? We just keep looking back. This is a silly example, but if we just wanted our kids to stay small and so we kept buying them clothes that were 2 sizes too small, you're going to get a call from their school, right? Why don't your kids have clothes that are the right size, right? It's just a silly example. But sometimes we do that in other ways that aren't as, we just think, oh, this is better, this is better, this is better, this is better. No. What's coming is better. Jesus, I want us to realize, right? I want us to understand this, that Jesus didn't come to create nostalgia. Jesus promises to give us an eternal homecoming. And this idea of home that we think about at Christmas is sometimes so much focused in the past. But Jesus didn't come to just keep us looking back. He came to push us to looking forward. See, Jesus came as a baby. That's incredible. It's insane. It's nuts when you think about it. But he didn't stay a baby. He grew up. He learned to talk. He learned to walk. He learned to do all of those things. And he became a man that would die on a cross and not stay in that grave, but he would walk out 3 days later. Listen, if all Jesus did was he was born as a baby and he died, that's really not that great, because we're all going to do that. It's completely unremarkable for Jesus to do that. But what makes him remarkable is the fact that 3 days later he walked out of that grave. That's what's remarkable. And we look back and we think about him as a baby, and it's insane and it's crazy and it's so important to us. But it is not the thing we're supposed to dwell on all the time. We look forward to what Jesus has promised in an eternal homecoming. Now, to help us understand this, I thought about a way that, and I think this is good. I think all of us, at least most of us, when we go home today, you've actually already got something in your home that can help you think about following Jesus this way. And it can help you thinking about the past, which is great. It can help you be present in the moment, and it can help you look to the future. Now, here's what I did. I just grabbed this picture off of Google Images, so we can put the picture up there. It's just a Christmas tree and a fireplace, whatever. And I just picked this one because I was like, I think most of us, if we were like Christmas Eve and that was our experience, most of us would be like, that's great, right? It would be nice. It would be awesome. We could just exist there, and it's beautiful and all the things. When we think about Christmas trees, and I know, by the way, that sometimes around this time of year, the idea of, are you supposed to have Christmas trees? And that people, those are conspiracy theories. Don't worry about them, okay? You can have a Christmas tree and love Jesus. It's fine, okay? So we think about this, but I want us to think about it in a different way. If we think back all the way to Genesis chapter 3, which is where sin comes into the picture, right? Have you ever thought about this? But where are they when they sin, and what is the source of their sin? It's a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, the source of their sin was their decision, right? But where do they find themselves? They're next to a tree. They take the fruit from a tree. Now, you fast forward to Jesus' life, and he's born, and he grows up like we talked about, and he dies on a cross that was made from a tree. And so you've got sin entering the world via and connected to a tree. You've got sin being paid for via a tree. Now, if you fast forward briefly to Revelation chapter 22, picking up in verses 1 and 2, this is what it says. Then the angel showed me a river with the water of life, clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. It flowed down the center of the main street, and on each side of the river grew a tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit with a fresh crop each month. The leaves were used for medicine to heal the nations. By the way, this picture is brought up, I think it's Ezekiel 47. If you go back and you really want to look at it, you can see it. And there it doesn't mention the lamb, but here it does mention the lamb. And we know that Jesus said he was the living water. And where this stream flows, what does it say on either bank, right? There's a tree. And so you've got in the garden where sin takes place, there's a tree. Where Jesus dies, there's a tree where he pays for it. And then when we get to Revelation, we understand that even in the new heaven and new earth, there's going to be a tree. And then in verses 3 through 5 of Revelation 22, this is what it says. No longer will there be a curse upon anything, for the throne of God and of the Lamb will be there, and his servants will worship him. And they will see his face, and his name will be written on their foreheads, and there will be no night there, no need for lamps or sun, for the Lord God will shine on them, and they will reign forever and ever. So when we look back at Christmas, right, it's beautiful, it's amazing, it's great, but it is not the end of the story. It's only the beginning. And when we look forward to this idea, and we look at what these verses say, that we would be in the presence of Jesus, and we will know him, and there will be no night. That it says that nothing will be cursed anymore, no more pain, no more sorrow, no more sickness, no more death. All of that goes away, and we get to be home with him there. That's why Jesus came at Christmas, to point us forward to that eternal homecoming that's waiting for us. And when you go home today, hopefully you've got a tree. If not, you've got time, right? You can go find one. Someone will have a tree somewhere if you still need one. When you look at that tree, maybe there's some nostalgia there, right? You think about what it meant when you were a kid and sitting next to that tree and the presents that were there. Maybe now it's a remembering now, like you get to spend it with your family, and it's a beautiful tree, and it's great, and you get to celebrate Christmas together. But remember that Jesus died on a tree. And remember that tree of life will be there. There will be trees in the new heaven and new earth, and we can look forward to that and understand that Jesus wasn't just a promise as a baby, but he was pointing forward to something, an eternal homecoming he promised us. I said it before, I'll say it again, that the gift of Christmas is about looking to the future more than living in the past. There's a gift for all of us, no matter what our past was, what we've done, what we've experienced, what's going on in our life now. There's a gift of a promise to be home with Jesus. And so I hope that this is true, that this Christmas, this week, as we get to celebrate and all the great stuff that comes with us, don't just look back in nostalgia. Don't catch yourself just looking back and just thinking about the past and just don't be there. But do this. Look forward with anticipation. Don't remember that Jesus coming as a baby was incredible. But look forward to what he was going to do and the promises he kept and the promises that he's made to each of us.